Some nights, I still wake up shaking. Not because of a nightmare, but because of a memory that refuses to fade. You ever have one of those nights that replay in your head, again and again, no matter how hard you try to forget? For me, it was the night everything I believed about love, loyalty, and marriage shattered. I can still hear it sometimes, the silence. That kind of silence that's so heavy, it presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. It was my husband's silence that night, the silence that said everything words couldn't. You see, people always talk about betrayal like it's something that happens suddenly, like one big explosion that ruins everything in an instant. But the truth? Betrayal doesn't always come crashing in. Sometimes, it starts slow, soft, creeping in like a whisper. It hides inside the moments you don't think matter, the unanswered text, the turned back, the I'm tired before bed, the empty space beside you that gets wider every night. That's how mine started. Quiet. Harmless. At least, that's what I told myself. I used to lie awake at night wondering when my husband stopped seeing me. When did I stop being the woman he used to hold like I was his whole world? When did my touch become routine, my presence, just background noise? He'd come home, drop his keys, mumble a hey, and disappear into his phone or his work. And I'd sit there, pretending it didn't hurt. Pretending I was okay. But deep down, I was starving. Not for attention, not for lust, but for connection. For someone to look at me and see me. And then, he came. My husband's old friend, Etan. It started innocent. He just needed a place to stay for a while, and we had the space. I didn't think much of it. But from the very first night he stepped into that house, something shifted. I didn't see it then, but I felt it. The air changed. The silence wasn't just lonely anymore, it was charged. Etan had this way of talking, this way of listening, that made me feel alive again. And that scared me more than anything. You ever meet someone who looks at you like they can see through your walls? Like they already know the things you never said out loud? That's what it felt like. It wasn't love, it wasn't even desire, not at first. It was something darker, something that made me question who I was, and what I was capable of. Because deep down, I knew, some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. And yet, part of me kept walking closer to the edge. Not because I wanted to fall. But because standing still hurt too much. That night, the night everything broke, I told myself it was just another evening. Just another dinner. Just another silence between me and my husband. But it wasn't. Because by the time the sun rose again, I wasn't the same person anymore. And neither was he. He didn't just betray me, he made sure my husband saw it. He wanted him to. And if I'm being honest, I don't know which part hurt more, what he did, or how my husband reacted. Because he didn't shout. He didn't cry. He just stood there. Watching. And that silence, his silence, became the sound that haunts me every night. This isn't just a story about infidelity. It's a story about how loneliness can twist into something dangerous, how guilt can eat you alive, and how silence can destroy more than words ever could. So before you judge me, before you decide what kind of woman I am, listen. Because sometimes, the most painful confessions come from the quietest hearts. Subscribe to Stories by TEE, because some stories aren't just told, they're felt. And this one, you're about to feel it. You know, when I look back now, our home wasn't unhappy. It was just quiet. Too quiet. Ryan and I had been married for 7 years, and somewhere along the line, we just stopped hearing each other. We still lived together, still shared a bed, still smiled when people were watching. But behind closed doors, there was this strange distance between us, like two people reading different books in the same room. He wasn't a bad man. Just tired. Tired of work, tired of life, maybe tired of me. He used to talk about dreams, starting a business, traveling together, building something that mattered. But lately, all he built were walls. I tried to hold things together. Dinner on time, candles sometimes, even the soft music he used to love. But he barely noticed. He'd just say, "Long day," and sink into his phone or his laptop. Some nights, I'd sit across from him, watching his face glow in the screen's light, and it hit me that I'd become invisible to the person I loved most. And invisibility is its own kind of pain. Then one morning, out of nowhere, Ryan told me his old friend Etan was moving in for a while. He'd just lost his job and needed a place to stay until he figured things out. I didn't argue. I said, "Of course." Because that's what wives do, they say yes, even when they feel no. Etan arrived 2 days later. Tall, quiet, carrying just one small suitcase and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. He smiled politely, but there was something behind it, something unreadable. The moment he stepped into the house, the air changed. Not in an obvious way, more like the faint shift in a room right before a storm. At first, it was easy having him there. He was helpful, fixed a broken drawer, helped with groceries, told light jokes that made the silence feel less heavy. Ryan seemed glad to have him around. They'd stay up late talking about old times, sharing drinks and laughter that I hadn't heard from my husband in months. But during the day, when Ryan was at work, the house felt different. Too big. Too quiet. And sometimes, I'd catch Etan's eyes following me for a second longer than they should. Not in a way that was rude or bold, just long enough to make me aware of myself again. It's strange, how the smallest things can start to fill the spaces you didn't realize were empty. A question at breakfast. A joke about the weather. A thank you said like it actually meant something. I told myself I was imagining it. That the warmth in his voice was just kindness, nothing more. That I was lonely, not lost. But deep down, I felt that slow pull, the one that comes before a bad decision. The one that feels like comfort when it's really danger in disguise. And the house began to feel crowded, not with people, but with unspoken things. Little moments I couldn't name. Little silences that made me feel both alive and afraid. Sometimes I'd catch Ryan watching us, not suspicious, just distant, like he was trying to remember how things used to be. And that hurt even more. Because I wanted him to see me, but not like that. At night, I'd lie awake listening to the rain or the hum of the fridge, telling myself nothing was happening. That I still loved my husband. That I was just lonely. But denial is a fragile shield, it cracks the moment you start to believe your own lies. If only I had known what was coming. If only I had seen how easily one kind gesture could turn into a chain of mistakes I could never take back. But I didn't. And that's how the beginning of the end started, not with shouting, not with anger, but with silence. I think the real change began with the little things, tiny, harmless gestures that didn't look like danger when they first appeared. Etan started helping out more. He'd carry groceries without being asked, fix the loose cabinet door that had been squeaking for months, reach the high shelf when I struggled. Every thanks I gave him felt like a patch over something I didn't know was broken. He had an easy smile, one of those half grins that looked like it had learned to hide pain. And he was funny in a quiet way, never trying to impress, just saying things that made me laugh before I realized I'd stopped laughing. It felt strange to enjoy it, like sneaking warmth from someone else's fire when my own had burned out. Ryan noticed, of course. The first few times, he just chuckled and said, "He's trying to stay useful. You know, Etan, he can't sit still." I nodded, pretending that explanation was enough. But every time Ryan brushed it off, I felt something shift inside me, like he was handing over pieces of my attention to someone else, without even realizing it. Then came that night. A Friday. Dinner was simple, pasta, wine, and the sound of rain outside. Ryan had a few drinks, more than usual, laughing too loud at stories from years ago. For a while, it almost felt like the old days, when his laughter filled the room and I could believe we were still okay. But as the night wore on, his laughter turned tired, and his eyes dulled. He excused himself early, said the wine was getting to him, and stumbled off to bed. I stayed behind to clean up the table. Etan lingered. He offered to help, and I didn't say no. The clinking of plates, the soft rhythm of rain against the glass, it was peaceful, but underneath it was something else. Something heavy, quiet, electric. When I turned to take the last dish from him, our eyes met. It wasn't long, maybe a second too long, but it was enough. There was no smile this time, no polite mask. Just a look that made my chest tighten, as if the air between us had changed its mind about staying neutral. For the first time, I felt two things at once, fear and longing. Fear, because I knew exactly what that look meant. Longing, because for one brief heartbeat, I wanted to be seen the way he was seeing me. I remember gripping the edge of the counter to steady myself. He said, quietly, "You shouldn't do everything alone, you know." And that simple sentence somehow carried the weight of everything unsaid. I mumbled something about it being late, about Ryan needing quiet, about dishes that could wait. But the silence that followed said more than words ever could. When he finally left the kitchen, I stood there for a long time, staring at the sink, at my hands, at the empty space he'd left behind. I told myself it was nothing. That I was imagining things. That it was just kindness I'd twisted into something else because I was tired and lonely. But deep down, I knew it wasn't nothing. Something invisible had crossed a line that night. And once a line blurs, it never really becomes sharp again. That was the moment the air in our house changed forever. It was still full of laughter sometimes, still full of normal days. But beneath it all, there was a hum I couldn't unhear, a current pulling us somewhere none of us could come back from. After that night, I tried to go back to normal. To wake up, cook breakfast, fold laundry, all the ordinary things that keep you from thinking too hard. I told myself it was nothing. That I had only imagined it. But my body didn't believe me. Every time I heard Etan's footsteps in the hallway, something in me tensed. Every time he said my name, too softly, I felt it echo in my chest. So I started avoiding him. I'd wait until I heard him leave the living room before stepping out of the bedroom. I'd keep conversations short, eyes lowered, smile polite. It should have been simple. But somehow, the more distance I tried to put between us, the more aware of him I became. That's the strange thing about temptation, it doesn't chase you in the open. It waits quietly, in the corners of your mind, until you turn toward it on your own. And in that house, full of unspoken things, I started to feel like every wall was watching me. There was always that tension, not loud or obvious, just a quiet pull that lived in the spaces between moments. Sometimes I'd catch myself listening for his voice when Ryan was gone. Not because I wanted to talk, but because silence made the thoughts louder. Then I'd hate myself for it. For the way my pulse reacted, for the way I straightened my hair before stepping out of my room. For caring at all. I'd stand at the sink washing dishes, and the window would show my reflection, tired eyes, messy hair, and I'd whisper, "What are you doing?" But there was no answer, because I didn't even know. Was it loneliness or madness that made me stay in the same room with him? Maybe both. Ryan was still distant, caught up in work and fatigue. He'd kiss my forehead goodnight and turn away before I could even exhale. That kind of small rejection, the quiet kind, it builds up like dust you stop noticing until you're covered in it. Etan, on the other hand, seemed to notice everything. The way I stirred my coffee. The songs I hummed while cooking. Even the way I folded Ryan's shirts. He never said much, but his eyes followed stories my husband no longer cared to read. I tried to see it for what it was, dangerous. Every time our paths crossed, I reminded myself, this isn't who you are. You love your husband. You promised forever. But forever feels very far away when you're invisible. One afternoon, I passed him in the hallway. It was nothing, a narrow space, two people moving in opposite directions. But our shoulders brushed, just lightly. I froze, half a second, and kept walking. My heart didn't. It raced like I'd done something unforgivable. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt louder, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, my own breathing. I kept replaying that tiny moment, hating how much it lingered. I began to avoid looking in mirrors because I didn't like what I saw there, a woman unsure of her own reflection. Guilt and curiosity fighting for space inside me. I prayed Ryan would notice something, anything, to pull me back before I slipped too far. But he didn't. He started working later, coming home quiet, eyes on his phone. And in those long evenings, I'd find myself sitting in the living room, pretending to read while Etan watched TV. Not speaking. Just existing in the same air. And that was enough to make my thoughts spiral. It was around then that I realized the danger wasn't in what had happened, but in what could. In the waiting. In the unsaid. Because he started looking at me as if I already belonged to him. Not in a way that demanded, just in a way that assumed. And the more I noticed it, the more I feared what might happen if I stopped resisting altogether. I kept telling myself I was in control, that I would never cross a line. But deep down, I knew that control is a fragile illusion. One that crumbles the moment someone makes you feel seen after years of being invisible. And I was terrified, not of him, but of what he represented, a mirror showing me everything my marriage had lost. That fear, that quiet, lingering fear mixed with longing, was the start of everything that followed. Days turned into weeks. And with every passing day, something shifted, subtly at first, then with growing weight. Ryan's silence began to take a new shape. It wasn't just distance anymore, it was awareness. The kind that comes when a husband starts to sense something off but can't quite name it. He didn't ask questions. Didn't accuse. He just watched. And somehow, that was worse. Because his silence wasn't empty, it was heavy. Every glance across the dinner table carried a question that neither of us wanted to answer. The sound of his fork scraping the plate, the way he lingered before leaving for work, it all began to feel like quiet surveillance. I told myself he was imagining things, that I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew we were both seeing the same cracks forming. Etan, on the other hand, was no longer pretending. He had stopped hiding his attention. It was in the way he looked at me, unflinching, deliberate, almost daring. He would find excuses to be near. A comment about dinner. A casual question about errands. Or sometimes nothing at all, just presence. Standing too close while I reached for a glass. Letting his hand brush mine when he passed something across the table. I told him once, quietly, you need to stop. He just smiled, that small, knowing smile, and said, then tell me to go. But I didn't. Because every time he came close, every time his voice lowered just enough for me to hear the weight beneath the words, something in me trembled. It wasn't desire, not exactly. It was something darker, the feeling of being noticed after being invisible for too long. I tried to fight it. Tried to act normal. But normal doesn't survive long in a house filled with tension. Every sound became charged, footsteps in the hallway, the creak of a door, the whisper of fabric when someone moved behind me. Even silence had texture. It wrapped around us, pressing closer each day. At night, I'd lie beside Ryan and feel the space between us stretch like miles. He didn't reach for me anymore. Didn't even try. And maybe that's why Etan's presence felt like gravity. Pulling me in even as I tried to hold on to what was left of my marriage. One evening, the storm broke quietly. It was late, Ryan had gone to take a shower, and I was in the kitchen cleaning up. Etan came in, leaning against the counter like he owned the air. The lights were dim, the room shadowed. He said nothing at first, just watched me. Then, softly, almost like a confession, I can't pretend anymore, Lena. My hands froze around the dish towel. Etan, don't. I see how you look at me, he interrupted. His voice was low, steady. And I know what that means. It means nothing, I whispered. But my tone betrayed me. He took a slow step forward. Then look me in the eye and say it. I did, or tried to. But my body refused to cooperate. My heart beat too fast. My breath caught halfway through my chest. Etan, this is wrong, I said, finally. You're I'm what? He asked, almost amused. Someone who makes you feel alive again? That word, alive, hit like a confession I hadn't meant to make. Before I could answer, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Ryan's. Etan took a step back, but his eyes didn't leave mine. And that was the moment Ryan walked in. He stopped at the doorway. The room froze. For a split second, everything, the unspoken tension, the late-night glances, the careful silences, collided in that tiny kitchen. Ryan looked at me first, then at Etan. No words. Just a stillness so sharp it felt like glass between us. I stepped back, clutching the counter as if it could hold me steady. Etan didn't move. He just stood there, chest rising slowly, eyes steady. Ryan's gaze drifted between us again, confusion clouded with something worse, realization. Not of what had happened, but what could have. The silence stretched too long. I could feel my pulse pounding in my throat, the air thick enough to choke on. Finally, Ryan said, quietly, "What's going on here?" No one answered. And in that silence, all three of us understood that nothing would ever be the same again. It was raining that night, hard. The kind of storm that makes you feel like the world outside is warning you about what's coming inside. Ryan had been quiet all evening, quieter than usual. He ate without looking at me. Didn't touch his drink. Didn't speak a word. But every second felt like he was listening, not to me, not to the rain, but to the truth finally clawing its way out. I thought I could hold the silence together. Pretend the tension was nothing more than another bad night in a loveless marriage. But then it happened. From the hallway, I heard Ryan's voice, low, cracking, and cold. "Lena," he said. "You think I can't hear you?" I froze. He was standing by the door to the guest room, Etan's room. And in that moment, I knew. He'd heard something. Maybe a whisper. Maybe a laugh. Maybe just the sound of two people trying too hard not to make a sound. The look on his face when I approached him. I'll never forget it. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shock. It was confirmation. The kind that doesn't need proof, just enough silence to fill the gaps between what's said and what's done. He didn't yell right away. He just asked, almost gently, "How long?" I swallowed hard. "Ryan, it's not." "Don't lie," he cut in, voice shaking. "Don't you dare lie to me." And then, as if summoned by the storm itself, Etan appeared from behind him. The air shifted instantly. Ryan turned, eyes dark with disbelief. The room shrank to the three of us, soaked in tension, betrayal, and rain light flickering through the window. "Of course," Ryan muttered. "Of course it's him." Etan tried to speak, but Ryan raised a hand, trembling but firm. "Don't. Not a word." I stepped between them, voice breaking. "Ryan, please, it's not what you think." He laughed then, a short, hollow sound that didn't belong to the man I married. "Not what I think," he repeated. "Then what is it, Lena? Tell me what it looks like when my wife stops looking at me and starts looking at my best friend." My throat burned. I wanted to scream that it wasn't real, that it wasn't love, that it was confusion, desperation, loneliness. But the truth didn't matter anymore. Because once doubt sets in, there's no convincing anyone otherwise. Etan finally stepped forward, his tone low but steady. "Ryan, I never meant." Ryan lunged before he could finish. A shove. A crash. The sound of something breaking, maybe a lamp, maybe everything we'd built. I screamed for them to stop, grabbing at Ryan's arm, but he pulled away like my touch was poison. His eyes, red, wild, landed on me. "Do you even hear yourself right now?" he said. "You're defending him." And that was it. That was the moment something inside me broke clean in two. Because he wasn't wrong. And I hated myself for it. The shouting died down, replaced by silence heavier than thunder. Etan stood by the doorway, jaw tight, breathing hard. Ryan just stared at me. There was no fight left in him. No rage. Just this, emptiness. The kind that swallows you whole when you realize the person standing in front of you isn't the same anymore, and neither are you. In that moment, I whisper now, something inside me shattered. Not because of what happened, but because he let it happen. He turned away first. Didn't ask me to explain. Didn't demand answers. He just walked upstairs, slow, deliberate, like a man climbing out of his own life. Etan called after him, but Ryan didn't stop. The rain beat harder against the windows, drowning out the sound of everything breaking inside me. And from that night on, my husband never said a word. Not that night. Not ever again. If you think you've seen Betrayal, wait till you hear what came after. Subscribe now to Stories by TE, because this story isn't over. The house was too quiet after that night. Not peaceful quiet, punishing quiet. The kind that crawls under your skin and whispers, "You did this." Ryan stopped speaking to me altogether. No shouting. No questions. Just silence. He'd wake up before sunrise, leave for work without a word, and come home long after dark. No dinner at the table. No glance in my direction. Not even anger, just absence. And that silence, it was louder than any scream could have been. I'd try to say something, anything, but the words never made it past my throat. They hung there, like ghosts, waiting to be acknowledged but never freed. Etan left the next morning. No note. No goodbye. Just gone. The guest room stayed locked after that. But sometimes I'd stand by the door anyway, just staring. Like maybe if I stood there long enough, I could rewind everything that happened inside those walls. But time doesn't move backward. It only loops, and punishes you with memories you can't turn off. Days turned into weeks. I stopped cooking. Stopped leaving the house. Stopped looking in mirrors. Because every time I did, I saw her. The version of me who crossed a line she swore she never would. The woman who traded her peace for a few stolen moments of attention. I'd lie awake at night, listening to the faint creak of the bed as Ryan turned away from me, always facing the wall. I used to wonder what he thought about before he slept. Now, I knew. He thought about me, but not the way he used to. He thought about what I'd done. Sometimes, I'd whisper his name just to see if he'd respond. He never did. Not once. People say guilt fades with time. It doesn't. It mutates. It becomes part of you, the way you breathe, the way you move, the way you look at the world. I couldn't focus on anything. Couldn't eat. Couldn't remember who I was before the storm. I'd scroll through old pictures of us, vacations, birthdays, anniversaries, and wonder how we ever got here. Two strangers sharing a house that used to feel like home. There was one photo, my favorite, of Ryan laughing as I leaned into him. I stared at it for hours that night. Then I put it face down on the dresser. Because looking at it hurt more than losing it. One evening, I tried to reach out. I texted him. Just 3 words, "I miss you." He saw it. Read it. Didn't reply. That silence was the answer I deserved. And somewhere in that hollow quiet, I realized something I hadn't before. It wasn't just Ryan I'd lost. It was me. The woman who used to smile without guilt. Who used to believe love could survive anything. Who used to trust herself. She was gone. I thought losing him was the worst thing, I whisper now, voice trembling. I was wrong. Losing myself was worse. But this isn't the end. Because sometimes, silence isn't forgiveness, it's the beginning of something darker. Subscribe to Stories by TE so you don't miss what happened when that silence finally broke. It's strange how quiet can start to feel like company. For weeks, I lived in that silence, until it became my punishment, my mirror, and my only witness. I started thinking about everything that led to that night. Every unanswered question. Every ignored touch. Every moment Ryan turned away and I told myself it was fine. But it wasn't fine. I wasn't fine. Sometimes I wonder, did I let it happen because I wanted to be seen? Or because I stopped caring who saw me? That question keeps me up at night. It circles in my head like a whisper that won't fade, even when I close my eyes. I remember standing in front of the mirror one morning. The same mirror where I used to get ready before work, where I used to smile at my reflection and think, maybe today will be better. But that morning, I couldn't even look at myself. I saw someone else staring back, someone I didn't recognize. Someone who'd made a choice that couldn't be undone. There was a photo frame on the dresser. It had cracked the night of the fight, the glass split right through our faces. Ryan on one side. Me on the other. Like the universe itself had drawn a line between us. I couldn't bring myself to fix it. Maybe because deep down, I knew some things aren't meant to be repaired. I started writing things down, things I couldn't say out loud. Little confessions that would never leave the page. I miss who we were. I hate myself for feeling alive in the wrong moment. I wish he'd screamed, at least then I'd know he still cared. Every line was a bruise that wouldn't fade. Some nights, I'd sit by the window and watch the porch light flicker, the same light Ryan had promised to leave on for me years ago when we were still young, still in love, still pretending forever was easy. Now, that light was just another reminder of what used to be. Of how far I'd fallen. People talk about forgiveness like it's this holy thing you give or receive when you're ready. But no one tells you what to do when you can't forgive yourself. When every breath feels like a reminder that you broke something sacred, not just between you and him, but within yourself. I wanted to believe there was still hope. That maybe, someday, we'd talk again. That maybe time could soften what happened. But deep down, I think I already knew. Some sins aren't meant to be forgiven. They're meant to haunt you. To sit beside you in the dark and remind you of the line you crossed, and the person you lost when you did. I used to think the worst kind of pain came from being betrayed. But now I know, the real pain comes from realizing you were the one who did the betraying. Stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. Subscribe to Stories by TE, the story's not done yet. You know, sometimes I wonder if there's anyone out there who really understands what it feels like, to live with a mistake that won't stop breathing beside you. To wake up every morning pretending everything's fine, while your heart is still trapped in the night that broke you. I've thought about telling Ryan the truth, all of it. Every detail, every reason, every tear I've cried since that storm. But then I think, what's the point? Would it heal him? Or would it just break what's left of us all over again? If you've ever felt trapped between guilt and silence, tell me, what would you have done? Would you confess, hoping the truth could somehow wash the sin away? Or would you stay quiet, and carry it, the way I've been carrying it, like a secret that burns every time you breathe? Because that's the thing about guilt, it doesn't go away when you hide it. It just waits. And it whispers. And it changes you, piece by piece, until you forget who you were before it found you. So I want to ask you, yes, you watching this, do you think forgiveness is possible after betrayal? Or are some wounds too deep to ever close? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you would have done. Maybe your story can help someone else feel less alone. And if stories like this make you think, make you feel, make you question what love really means when it's tested, then don't forget to subscribe to Stories by TE. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We reveal the parts of love, guilt, and desire that most people are too afraid to talk about. One moment, that's all it takes to destroy everything we thought we knew about love.